Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on the Yevamot daf Mem Vav, we are going to begin on the bottom of Mem Hamid Bays, 3 lines on the bottom. Omer Rav Chama Bar Guria Omer Rav Halokech Eved Min Ha'Oved Kachavim, a person who purchases a servant from an Oved Kachavim, and his intention is for him to become an Eved Kanani. However, v'kadam v'tov l'shem ben chayrin. So, if a person immerses themselves to become a convert, and they are in the house of the Oved Kachavim, then he becomes a ben chayrin. That is the din. So too over here, that as you are in the process of purchasing him, he went to his toyavel himself. So kind of atzma ben chayrin. In fact, that's the din. He becomes completely free. My time, as we continue on Mem Vav Madav, the reason is because Oved Kachavim gufa lo yikani. Because when it comes to an Oved Kachavim, he's not kinda the body of the person. Says Rashi, Oved Kachavim will kanu legufa shel zeh mitchila. He never acquires him. Kidei arma kaman v'lohem kainim zed zeh. An Oved Kachavim cannot acquire another. So therefore, there's no kinyan when it comes to the owning of the body. So my kanule who the maknile Israel. Only what he, the Akum, owns is what he's actually giving over to the Israel. Therefore, since he went to the mikveh and immersed himself to become a ben chayrin, so that's exactly what happens, and his shibud is released. So the shibud, the rights of the Eved, is all you have. So by being toivel with shem geris, then he's no longer a slave. Of course, you'd have to reimburse him for his losses. Hektish chametz v'shichur mafkiin midei shibud. So when it comes to the three things, the shibud gets removed. So first of all, when it comes to hektish, says Rashi, also shar apoteki. Let's say a person made his ox into an apoteki, which is a designation as a lien on a property. Vikdishu lemizbeach, and then afterwards you're makdish that shore to the mizbeach. Dehavi kedushas aguf. Once it attains the level of kedushas aguf on that animal, paka shibud de kama. The original shibud is removed. However, Rashi says, but by kedushas bedakabayis, it's not mafka, as it quotes the Gemara in Erechin. Fine. And then Rashi continues. Him also chametzo apoteki. Let's say you made one's chametz as an apoteki. Again, this designation lien on property to an Oved Kachavim. V'harihu munach biyado shel Yisrael. It's the hands of Yisrael. Uvash sheish shel erev Pesach, and all of a sudden, the 6th hour of Pesach comes. Paka shibud ha'Oved Kachavim. Hoi v'loi havi mamish didei v'chayv zel levayroi. Since it has to be destroyed anyway, so it's like it's not there. Therefore it's gone. V'shichur, as we saw. Also, abdo yapotiki l'chaveroi. If you make a slave as an apotiki for your friend v'shichur, and he becomes freed, v'shocher, he's free. Upakim u'maynu shel malva, and the money of the lender gets basically gone. However, again, that doesn't mean that he's not going to be reimbursed. Okay, so for Gemara, Mesev Rav Chisda Masa Bluria. There's a story with this person, Bluria Hagiyres, who was a convert. Shikadmu Avadeha, that again, similar to what we said, what happened was that her slave came first, V'tavu Lefaneha, and immersed in front of her. So we see that in fact this person becomes free. Now Rashi says, and the diak is going to be lefaneha in, only if the tefillah took place before she converted. L'achareha lo, says Rashi, lefi shehein gerim v'hi ovedes kachavim, because she was an Oved Kachavim herself. The Oved Kachavim Yisrael hulkan lagufe. L'achareha lo, al magabi Yisrael. If let's say she was already a yid, the only reason why is because it was before she converted, which is mashma after she converts, that would not work because he can't make himself free by being toivel. So l'chayra, it's a kasha on what we just said. Mara says no, it's not l'faneh in l'charel lo. Really, even l'charel. But there is a chiluk. If it was before the conversion, ben bestam ben meforish, whether the person just immersed themselves stam, says Rashi, shul pirish hari anu tayvul Hashem b'nei chayrin. He doesn't specify why he's doing it, or he does specify because it was done lefaneha, in the hands of the Kachavim, so then it's chal, and therefore he becomes free. However, lachareha, afterwards, we're dealing now with the Yisrael, kimaforish in bestamlo. The only time that this person will go free, we do say he'll go free, but he has to be maforish, he has to explain specifically that he's doing l'shem b'nei chayrin. Amrav avia lo shana elbo kech minov Kachavim. The only time we say this din is if you're purchasing it from a kachavim. Of a kachavim gufe kani. But of a kachavim, his body itself is kindness, says Rashi. Of a kachavim shemachar atzmo Yisrael. If you have an of kachavim himself, not that you're purchasing it from of kachavim, but you purchase an of kachavim directly, he sells himself. Kanu Yisrael gufe. Then he's kind of the body. He does not go free. So it's only in a situation where it's from the hands of an chachamim to another chachamim, but not in the case that he just is moichers atzmai to Yisrael. Those who are the dwellers, hagarim imachem, that live among you, mehem tiknu. So atem kainin mehem v'lohem kainin mikem v'lohem kainim zeh mizeh. So it's only the situation, as we said, if they're purchasing one from the other, it's not a kinyan. However, if it's directly from them to you, then he becomes yours. Below him kainim mikem, and the akim is also not kain. So ma'isi yadav. Does it mean that you don't get the ma'isi yadav, his work, to what? When Avi Chachavim has the Yisrael work for him, he's not kind of the Masi Yadav. He doesn't get to keep the work of his labor. So an Avi Chachavim, who purchases the Yisrael, he does at least get the Masi Yadav. It's talking about the ownership of the person himself. So an Avi Chachavim will not be able to get the body of the Yid, he only gets his Masi Yadav. Feel gufe, that you can even get the guf in the situation where he sells himself directly to you. So Parach Rav Acha, he asks the question, Ema bekasva uvetfila. Maybe it's telling you that you, regarding his silver and betfila, and to immerse himself, says Rashi. L'shem abdosu dekaim rachmana likne avol im kadam atav l'shem ben chayrin hachanamid ben chayrinhu. Maybe taka, if he would be tayvel l'shem ben chayrinhu, would work kasha. Omer Shmuel, but sarach l'takvay b'mayim. In order to prevent him from becoming free, you should hold him down in the water. So if you hold him down while he's being tayvel, so he's made free, as you retain ownership. Says Rashi, Kishimat bilu l'shem yadus l'abdus sarach sheis kafenu l'seiselhem oil malacha b'mayim, that you're like putting some yoke upon him on the water, kadesh tehi nearest kitfilas abdus. So it has the appearance that it's really an immersion for slavery. Shafil yarmahu l'shem ben chayrin loikah natzmo. Even if you would say, I'm doing it l'shem ben chayrin so I could be free, that still would not work. His words will have no power, will have no validity. So in order to prevent this issue of losing this person, as he's about to immerse himself, you should hold him down on some level so that it shows that it's really l'shem avdos. So on this, the Gemara says, Ki hai de minyamin Avde, similar to the following story of the servant of Ravashi, Bolat Vule, he wanted to immerse himself, which again, he could become free. So Master Nihile Ravina, given over to Ravina, Rav Achbar, Barav the Rabba, Emilhu, Chaza, Diminaichu, Kiboyisle. It seems that he wants to be like you, says Rashi, Im Hikdim V'yarmo Shem Ben Chayrin. It seems like he wants to become Ben Chayrin. So Ramule Arvisa, but Savare, literally should put a leash on the neck. Arpu lay, loosen up. V'samsimule, and then tighten it. Arpule, why should you first of all loosen it? Ki heichidol have chatzitza. He's going to the mikveh, so he can't be a chatzitza if it's too tight. However, however, you should at least keep it a little bit tight so that it shows that he still is an eved. At the time that he was lifting up his head from the water, zulta detina areshe, that he put like a bucket on his head. V'yarmele zil amtula be marach. Go to your master. In other words, as Rashi says, kli molitit, it was like filled with mud. So basically, he was saying that you are still an eved, and therefore he does not become free in that situation. Emily Rapapa, Rabba Chazi Mar, Hani de Papa Bar, Abba de Yoiv Zuzil Inshi. He would give money to people like Kargaihu for taxes, Ushavdilahu, and then they became obligated to him. Kinafik and after when they left, Srichigita de Cheruso lo. When he would leave, would he need to write a document of freedom or not? It says Rashi, Diyav Zuzu Inshila Kargaihu, Kasheinois in Kesef, Gulgoylas Melech. When they were not able to pay their head tax to the king, so the tax collector would grab hold of them. The people of Papas were very wealthy. And he would pay the taxes to the king, and he would be able to purchase them as slaves. The question is, is this actually an acquisition? Does he actually have to write now for them to go free a get cherus or not? So she says it's almost like you were sleeping. Wasn't it said to you this matter that Rav Shesha said that mohar kaihu dahani betafsa de malka monach, that there's a seal that is placed upon the king, says Rashi Shehain loy lavadim, that they are to him as slaves. Tafsa, Rashi says, is argaz, some type of like a basket or some type of a chest. Umalka oyman, the king says, mandol yoiv karga mishtabid lamand yoiv karga. He says beferish, that someone who doesn't pay his taxes, he will become a slave to the person that does pay the taxes on his behalf. Says Rashi, Hilkach Mechahu, it's a real sale. Ubagita de Cherusa, and he'll actually need to give a get of freedom. Ibo Aguri Ushturi Babas Israel, for him to be able to be like a Yid. So he actually would need this get. Shecher. Rav Chia bar Abba Ikol Gavul. So he went to this location. Chaz Benos Israel, the Ma'avrin Migerim Shemo Votavu. He saw that they were engaged with people who converted through, but they were only circumcised but didn't have tefillah. Because they also saw Chamad Yisrael, this wine, the Mazgi of Chachabim, that the Chachabim would mix it up and pour it, dilute it for Shasi Yisrael, and they would drink it. Because the Termusin, the Shakli of Chachabim, he saw these beans that were prepared and cooked by the non-Jews, the Achli Yisrael, and he didn't eat it. And didn't say anything. So also Rabbi Yochanan will say, you should actually go and announce the following things. First of all, these children are going to be a mamzerim. Their wine is no good. Yal turmusin, and their beans mishum bishuli of the chachavim. You're not to eat them because it's bishalakim. Why? Because these people are not b'nei Torah. Says Rashi, this is actually going on the beans. The einbo mishum bishul of chachavim can mafarsha come on el v'fishin b'nei Torah. When it comes to this last one, it's the fact that they're not b'nei Torah is the reason why this is an issue. Save also lehem. Therefore, you should go and answer to them shulo nizalzu b'bishuli of chachavim. Because even though this may not be an issue in general, but if they're lax in this and they don't understand the distinctions of when something is considered to be bishul akum or not, so therefore they're going to end up potentially violating bishul akum, actual bishul akum. So now let's understand these three things. Al b'neihem she'imam zerim. Why? So the person's not a yid until you're moyel v'yitbol. You give on the tavel of chachavimhu. So this person, these men, since even though they had milah but they didn't have tefillah, so they're not Jewish. And not only that, when it comes to a yid, a Jewish woman rather, who has relations with Chachavim, the product of that relationship, that child is a mamzer. So therefore, that's why these children are mamzerim, even though the men had milah but didn't have tefillah. What's the problem with the wine? And when it comes to a nazir, we don't even want to come close to the wine. So what's the problem over here? So Rashi says, even though they actually touch it, but because it was through their kayach, is the connection to that wine by pouring it, so therefore that's also a violation. So where I said, what? B'nei Torah shari? You're telling me if you're B'nei Torah, you're allowed to have bishul akum? Rabbi Yitzchak, that if you have anything that can be eaten raw, then it's not bishul akum, even if it's cooked. When it comes to these beans, and you can't eat it while it's raw. So it's clearly it's not allowed b'chlal. No, Rabbi Yochanan Kida Chishna Svirle. Tiyam Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yitzchak Mishim Rav Kol Shein Oil Al Shulchan Malachim Le'echel Bo Esapas Ein Bo Mishim B'Shol Yav Chachavim. So it's actually, the criteria is not whether it's a food that's eaten raw, but it's actually a food that is or is not chashav enough to be served to the kings. The time in B'nei Torah shari. Apparently, this was a dish that was not something which was befitting to be put in front of the kings. Okay, so let's see a couple questions before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Mem Vav but Aleph, question 6. Hakaina Eved Akum. So you purchased an akum. It must say gufu kanaylo. It must say in ela shibud. So when is it just a shibud, and when is it that you're actually kaina? So as we saw, kaina mide akum acher. If you purchased him from another akum, so enu ela shibud. However, if he sold himself, then in that situation, the din is that you do have a kinyan on his guf if he sold himself directly. Mashen kain, if he was an akum from an akum, so then that would not be the din. Okay, question 7. So he saw wine of Yisrael, the mazgi akum b'chazat tormusin, the shakli akum madua ein behen iser mitzad hadin. So he says like this: B'yayin mishum the akum lo naga el koichahu, tormusin mishum the chol shenu oilo shochan malachim ein ba mishum b'shuli akum. So those are the two reasons. The first one about koichai is derived from the Rashi which we saw, and then the second is about it's totally on if it's kol shein oil al shulchan malachim. So we have different stringencies, again, when it comes to these dinim, when we are talking about a person who is not a B'nai Torah, because the person who is not B'nai Torah is not able to really make these chilukim. TB 30. Ma hatam shalokech eved min ha'akum v'kodem v'tov l'shem ben chayrin kana atzmo ben chayrin. So this is on the top of the Amud, which we saw. This is TB 30. Kivan she'akum lo kana akum l'gufo v'lomacher el shibud v'shichur mafkiya maybe shibud. So this is TB 30. V'kachavim gufo lo kanile ma de kanile hu de kanile Yisrael v'kivan de kodem v'tavo l'shem ben chayrin afkil shibude. Okay. Weiter. Tanur. So the Gemara says as follows: Ger shemoil. So as we talked about, it only had miyav lo tavel. So Belezer Oimer harzeh ger. He's still considered a ger as long as they did the milah. Why? Sheken matzinu biavosenu. Because we find by our forefathers shemol v'lo tavlu. We find that they did milah, but we don't find that they did tefillah. Says Rashi, biavosenu shemol b'mei Moshe kishiyatzim mitzrayim v'yatzim mechlal b'nei nayach l'kabel Torah l'kabel b'nei shechina. So what did they do? They were makabel the Torah in the Pnei Shechina by doing milah, but don't see anything about tefillah. So therefore, you're yid, and you're in the situation to be makabel Torah with just milah. So that's according to the sheet of Rabbi Lezer. However, So Rabbi Lezer Omer Hari said Ger Shekain Matzinu Mavosenu Shemolu V'lo Tavu V'lo Moil. What if they were Toivel and they were not Moil? So Rabbi Yeshua Omer Hari said Ger. So he says the other way around. If all you did was tefillah, you're a ger. Why? Because Hari is a ger. Shekein matzinu b'imahois shetavu v'omolu. When it comes to the women, they immerse themselves. The women had to have immersed themselves because if they didn't do that, then there's nothing else that they could have done because they can't. There's not shaykh to milah. So it must be they did tefillah, and that's good enough. So no, one or the other is not enough. You're not half Jewish. You have to do both. Rabbi Yeshua nami ne'elf me'avois, Rabbi Lezer nami ne'elf me'imahois. Why don't you learn out from the other ones? Avos didn't do tefillah, the imos didn't do milah. So v'chitem ain't done after Mashiach. You can't compare to a woman because they're not shaykh to have bris milah. So of course that's not something you can compare to a man. So Vasanya, it's possible we could be done after Mashiach. How do we see that? Rabbi Lezer Omer. How do we know when it comes to purchasing the carbon Pesach, it has to be with chulin money, it cannot be with meiser sheni money? Never Pesach b'Mitzrayim and never Pesach l'daris. Ma Pesach Mitzrayim ein bo elam min chulin, which it could only be there was no such thing as meiser sheni. Didn't occur yet that mitzvah when we're in Mitzrayim. So Pesach l'daris ein bo elam min chulin. So Rabbi Kiva he done after Mashiach. Normally Apple Pishiach Ragadayla he v'nilman himena. Says doesn't make any difference, even though it's. One case is an efshar because it's something which didn't happen yet. So of course it was only minachulin. But maybe when there is meiser sheni available, you could use meiser sheni funds. So we see that we can still make that connection, which means we're done efshar Mashiach. So l'chayra, you should be able to do the same thing and to be able to say that just like by women there's only tefillah, so maybe that's only needed also by a man and it should work. El as we continue to memvav and beis. If there was only tefillah, that actually does work because we learned that up from women and we're done after Mashiach. If you only did meal and not tefillah, it must be that the men also immersed themselves in mikvah. So Manole, how do we know that they did this? The pasuk says so the pasuk is talking about by Matan Torah that they had to immerse themselves and become sanctified. So Maba Makam Shein Tu'un Kibus, in a place where they didn't need to do laundering. Tu'un Tefillah, they still require Tefillah. So Makam Sheton Kibus and Odin Sheton Tefillah. So certainly Tefillah should be required. It says Rashi, Makam Sheton, let's see the top Rashi, but Makam She'en Toin Kibus. Kigon Balkari. Balma, regular Balkari, if a person has a similar mission, the pasuk says Varachas b'mayim v'tam yad erev. He doesn't say anything about washing his clothes. He just has to clean. He has to go to the mikvah. So so even though he doesn't have to clean his clothes, he has to be toivel himself. So a place where you do have to clean your clothes, going kibul Torah by kabbalah Torah, it says v'chimul simloisam. Then l'chayr it's a different pasha that you'd have to do tefillah, because otherwise, why would in a place where you don't even have to do kibus, you have to do tefillah? So a place where you do have to kibus l'chayr definitely should do tefillah. So that's the kabbalah chaymer. And that must be they did tefillah. No, but Dilma Nikias Ba'alma, says Rashi. It doesn't mean that they did the kibus in the time of the in Kabbalah Torah because it's some form of cleansing of Tumah. It's just to be clean. El Shehu Bigdehim Levanim V'Hagunim L'Kal B'Panei. You should look nice when you're about to be Makabel the Torah. El Mahacha. So you can actually derive from a different pasuk, Vayikach Moshe es Adam, that Moshe took the blood, V'Yizrak al Ha'am, and he placed and he threw it on the nation. And we learn that the only way that Hazah can take place is only if you first immersed yourself. So if it says that he was engaged in this process of doing Hazah, it must be that they were also they were toivel before. Rabbi Yeshua tefillah be'im hois menon. So how does he know that women even immerse themselves? Svarhu. De'im kain b'man nechlas shechina. Because if they didn't go to the mikveh, there's nothing else. If there's no milah, so must be they did tefillah. So it's just a davar pasha, it's a svar. You have to do both. Pshita yachram halachim karabim. The halacha is, again, is like the rabbim, and that's what the chacham say. Maybe that means it's just like Rabbi Yossi, who's a yachid. The sign Yehari Shababi Yomer Malti. Someone comes up to you and says, I did mila, tavalti, but I did not go to the mikvah. So matbilin oisai, we will be toivel him. Umabakach, says Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, says Rashi, im ein milasul l'shem mila hoyav tovel b'tfila sagi. So he says, even if his meal was not l'shem mila, which he says it was, but now he's going to be toivel, and the tefillah is enough. Rabbi Yossi Omer ein matbilin. We're not going to immerse him in there because maybe he's like one of the Gevoinim, and it wasn't a real mila. Says Rashi, v'sarach l'hatif mimenu dam bris. You may need to do hatafas dam bris because Rabbi Yossi holds you need tefillah and mila. Lafikach, therefore, is like this. Rabbi Yossi Omer ein matbilin. Lafikach matbilin ger b'Shabbos. Dear Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you can immerse a ger on Shabbos. Even though you can say, it's an issue of being masakin mana, you're fixing a kli. However, according to this shita, Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's not a problem. Because, after all, if he comes and says, I was moyel v'lo tavalti, matbil noiso, we will immerse him. It's not a problem. Matbil noiso. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Mabakach, says Rashi, Lafikach, Hoyel Rabbi Yehuda, B'chad Sagya. All you need to do is one. So Matbil b'Shabbos will allow, then you can do tefillah, because Ger Shemol, Esmol, Afanenu, because if you have a convert who came in front of us yesterday, Debemila Sagile, he did the meal, that's enough. He doesn't really need technically to do tefillah, it's still good. He's still a yid, even though he didn't do tefillah yet. So the fact you're going to do tefillah, that's not being masakin mana, you're not being masakin gavra, so therefore because of that, you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi Yomer ein matbilin. You're not allowed to be a matbilin because you're actually accomplishing something. So Mamar Lafikach matbilin ger b'Shabbos pshita. That again, l'chayr is pashik. That even the fact that he had the bris, that's enough. So that seems obvious. So Rabbi Yehuda tefil ikar tefil b'Shabbos loy. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda Taka holds that tefil is the main thing, even though one or the other is acceptable. But the main part of converting is the tefillah. To come a second gaver kamashmon. Rabbi Yehuda oha boy. You just need to do one or the other. It's not that one is greater than the other, and therefore really tefillah is more important. Therefore you shouldn't be toivel on Shabbos. No. The fact that you did meal is good enough. Rav Yossi Omer ein matbilin pshit. The Givandi Rav Yossi tarti bi'inon to kuni gaber b'Shabbos lo maskaninon. You can't be masakin gaber by being toivel him in a mikvah on Shabbos. So ma'adetem Rav Yossi meal ikar b'hasam hudaloi havi meal b'fanenu. Over there, what happened to Rav Yossi? He says the meal is the most important, and here, doloi havi meal b'fanenu. It's not really in front of us because it may not have been done. The bris may not have been done l'shem gerus, so it really didn't mean anything. If let's say he actually has a proper bris milah, ema lit boil, zeb shabbata, let him be toivel on the Shabbos. Rav Yossi tarti boy. Does that? No, it doesn't make any difference if you think the meal is good or it's not so good. Either way, we're not going to want him to do tefillah. Amar Rabba uvda havi be Rabbi Chia. Bar Rabbi, Rav Yossi Masni Rav Oishi Bar Rabbi, Rav Safra Masni Rav Oishi Rav Chia Diosachamei. He went in front of him and he's following a ger Shemoy V'Otaval. There was a ger that did meal but not tefillah. So Amalei Shehei Khan, wait here Ad L'Mochar. It's nighttime now. Wait until tomorrow, and then v'nat bilinoch, and then we will immerse you. Shema loss. Shema ger sar shloisha. The fact that he said that this is the amount of people, so you need to have three like as a basin, as part of the conversion process. Shema mina enu ger ad shimo v'yitbol. You need to not only do the meal but also tefillah. Shema mina ein matbil ger b'layla. we don't do it at night. So maybe need experts. It just happens to be that the people that we mentioned happen to be experts, but lav dafka doesn't mean that they were the only ones that are able to do it. The reason why you need 3 people is because it says the word mishpat. Therefore, it has this din of like a beis din, and therefore a beis din requires the minimum of 3, had to have 3 people in it. Okay, we're going to stop here. Let's see, maybe another question. Question 8. So at night, no one says it's allowed because it's a din of mishpat. So that certainly is not allowed. However, can you be toivel on Shabbos? It's actually a machlokas. It's all totally if the tefillah is ma'akev. If it is ma'akev, then you're misaken, and if not, then it's mutter. So again, it's all totally on that reason. Whether you can be toivel on Shabbos is whether or not the tefillah is necessary. One without the other is enough, or you need to actually have done both. Question TA29. Maha makar shiger sarch tefillah, or maha makar shesarch shloisha. So tefillah we require because it says v'yikach Moshe es hadam v'yizrak al ha'am v'in hazabul tefillah. And gimel because it says the word mishpat.